Hey, Geraldo, every time I tweet I'm doing your radio show or something, some says to me, Jerry Rivers. What's the story?
It's absolutely false. It's an urban legend. I just can't shake it.
He just said, you said he smiled or something like that when you said, my name is Gerald. What you said, what's Jerry?
Jerry.
He said, what's Jerry short for? Gerald, and you didn't like that?
Yeah. And, you know, so my whole family called me Geraldo, the whole Spanish family. You know, it's funny being Spanish and Jewish, being Puerto Rican and Jewish. It's a real culture clash. But my Puerto Rican family is so vastly larger than my Jewish family that they always called me Geraldo. So he said, hey, why don't you use that? I said, oh, that's fine with me.
The implication that everyone's trying to make is always, oh, it's a pander. It's a pander to the Latino audience. His real name is Jerry Rivers.
It's absolutely false. And you know what I find? I find that people who go that way, if you look at the people that tweet that, they're like the fringe, unaccomplished people who hate that I have an enduring success in my 5th decade. You know, but if you look up Urban Legends, it's a very popular website. They analyze it, they examined it. I never, not one day, not one time, used the name Jerry Rivers. And yet it's something I can't shake. It comes up, it's like generational.
Right.
It's almost like my friend Cheech's movie, Up in Smoke. It's always, it gets hip every year. This is a rumor that comes back every year. Right?
All right, so listen.
Anyway, it's BS.
You've won Peabody's. You've been a war correspondent, multiple wars. You've had one of the highest rated talk shows in the history of talk shows. But there's one moment in your life that I'm absolutely fascinated by. I think it's the one that gives us the window into your past and shows us a direction for your future.
I am so anticipatory now to figure out which one.
Well, you've told this story, but it's, again, I feel like this is the one where I get to know Geraldo Rivera. You are locked in a hotel room in Chicago. You don't want to take visitors. You don't want to take calls. You have just opened the vast emptiness of Al Capone's vault. That moment.
How nice of you to remember.
That's the one, though. That's the one that I feel like that's where I get to know Geraldo. But before you tell me about that hotel room, which I want to be inside of, get me there. Tell me about the job offer for Al Capone's vault.
Well, I have to back up just a little bit. I'll tell it as briefly as I can. I was on 2020, and I had a very successful career. 2020 was very highly rated. I was the senior producer and one of the managing editors of the program. Had an 8-year run. I had an 8-year run. It was 1985. I had been very close to Roone Arledge, the president of ABC News. We were rocking and rolling. That show really was catapulting to great success. 15 years I had been at ABC. And to make a long story short, we wanted to do a story about the alleged relationship between Marilyn Monroe, the sex symbol of her time, and Robert Francis Kennedy, the Attorney General of the United States, and maybe even his brother, the 35th President of the United States, John F. Kennedy. Sexual relationship, intimate relationship. What was the relationship? The story was going to be reported by Sylvia Chase, a dear friend and colleague of mine, and it was spiked. It was spiked by Roone Arledge, and we all complained about it. And
why did he spike it?
He spiked it, we thought. Now, he said he spiked it because it was gossip, not news reporting.
What was in the report?
The report alleged that there was, I mean, with all of the mob connections and the, you know, the inference was there was a lot more to that story, the Marilyn Monroe Kennedy story, than many people had been reporting. We had new information. Sylvia was going to go with it. Roone spiked it. We alleged that he spiked it because Roone was best friends with Ethel Kennedy at the time, the widow of the late great Attorney General. We complained about it. Hugh Downs, Barbara Walters, and I, the three of us, Hugh Downs was my co-host, or co-host with Barbara. I was the lead correspondent. We vowed that we would go together and we would complain about what Roone did, spiking the story. So P.S., when the push came to shove, I was like the only one who stuck my neck out and complained. Roone, who had been my best friend and my mentor for 15 years, and I love him, he said goodbye.
The three of you did not end up going to him, you're saying? Only you did?
Only I did.
And you said Roone had no integrity.
That may have been the broadest you know, interpretation of that. That's certainly the way Roon saw it. It wasn't the way I intended it. What I intended it saying was that we needed journalistic freedom and that there was a legit story and we should have let it air.
He fired you.
He fired me.
How many network executives would have fired you in that situation? You were at ABC.
Well,
NBC,
you know,
CBS have done this?
I can't answer that, Will. What I can say is that the great producer guys, the guys like Roger Ailes and Roon Arledge, the seminal figures in broadcasting, they put a lot of stock in personal relationships. In other words, if I say to you, don't worry, I'll never screw you, then you can never screw them, and they'll never screw you. It's almost like a blood oath. It's something that you go to the grave with, and Roon definitely saw that I had betrayed that blood oath by me saying to the public, to People magazine, I remember very well, that I thought the story was spiked in a way that was inappropriate. I had betrayed a confidence and a friendship and a loyalty that had lasted a decade and a half. He had been my mentor at ABC.
Do you regret it?
Oh, I regretted it tremendously. I mean, not just because he fired me. I regretted it because I should have gone to Roon. I should have gone to Roon Arledge and say, Roon, you can't do this. So anyway, I'm fired. Going back to your original question, how we get to the hotel room in Chicago. I'm fired. I say, what am I going to do? I'm the most famous unemployed person in America because I was on the top of the heap there. At network, primetime, success. Every single week I was on to tens of millions of people. 2020 was huge. It wasn't like it is now. And now it's a news magazine. Then it was a big hit show, top 10 show. So I say, you know what? I can't get a job right now. I have a little bit of severance. They give me, I think, $500,000 severance. I said, I'm going to sail my boat around the world. All right, so now it's January 1986.
You're by yourself, by the way, sailing your boat around the world?
No. I'm with my girlfriend at the time, later became my wife, C.C. Dyer, and my brother Craig, and it was the three of us, basically. So we visit my mom, who I just visited now in Sarasota, Florida. We sail from Sarasota to Key West, Florida, first stop, and what happens? The Challenger, is it the Challenger? The Challenger blows up, Space Shuttle. We actually see it, and I hear about it, and oh my God, I almost collapsed, almost fainted. All right, so that happens, that drama. Then we sail to Cuba, then we sail to Mexico, then we're in the Panama Canal. We're going from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean, transiting that historic, conduit between the oceans. So in the middle of the Panama Canal, I check back. You must call your agent, Jim Griffin at William Morris. I pick up the phone, and I call him from Panama. You know, in those days you didn't have cell phones or satellite phones. Or whatever. So I said, what's up? He says, I got a gig for you. I got a job for you. He said, they discovered this gangster's vault in the basement of the Hotel Lexington on the south side of Chicago. They think there's boons in there. They think there's money in there. They think there's guns in there. They think this is Al Capone's vault. You got to come back. I said, how much? They say $25,000. And I say, my nut is $50,000 a month. If they give me $50,000, I'll go. I call him back. You know, this is all happening very quickly.
Oh, you and I have talked about this. I looked this up, by the way. Your monthly nut, $50,000 in 1985. That's right. $110,000 in today's dollars.
It's a lot of money.
You spent some money.
I spent some money. I got a lot of kids. I got a lot of wives. So anyway, make a long story short, I go from Panama to Chicago. We get there, and because it's my first gig, my first time back, now it's April of '86, and now 4 months have passed, and I've been on television every day for 15 years, and now I'm disappeared, and now I'm coming back, and I'm opening up. It's a very exciting concept. When
Huge
you think
hype,
about it.
huge.
Live, 2 hours live, 16 countries sign on. It's live everywhere. I know that Peter Jennings, that snob, he's watching. I know all those that give me a hard time on the news, but they're all watching. Everybody is watching.
Okay, but stop.
Right.
Now, at this moment, everybody's watching. You're doing this 2-hour broadcast.
Right.
Did it ever enter your mind once, it's possible there's nothing in here?
No. You know why? Because we had audio, we had like sonared the empty vault, and there was stuff in there. I mean, it was like if you look at a sonogram, you could see that there's stuff in there. So it had to be. Why else would there be a wall?
So you're walking into this with no fear. You're thinking this is going to be huge. There's
I
going to be
thought
bodies.
maybe there wasn't the bones, but there was money. Maybe there wasn't money, but there'd be guns. Maybe there had to be some artifacts, because it had not been open since the 20s, since Capone was the exclusive tenant of that space. Had to be something. So I was relatively confident. To make a long story short, let me just say that everybody did watch. Everybody in the world watched.
30 million people.
They watched me humiliate myself on live television. And there was nothing in there. I found a Gilbey's bottle, empty Gilbey's gin bottle, a stop sign, a couple of knickknacks, but there was nothing else there.
They opened that vault. It's empty. What is your first thought?
I went to bury myself in there.
Immediately you realize this is a huge
The
failure.
one thing you can't do with me, you can do a lot, you could say a lot, but you can't humiliate or embarrass me, because I won't take it. I mean, I'll fight you to the death. And here I had humiliated myself, a proud man. I knew that all those snobs had been watching me, and there I was, and I had taken this chance, and I had taken this gig, and there was nothing in there. So I went right across the street. There was a Mexican restaurant right across the street from the Hotel Lexington, and I started drinking tequila there, CC&I, and a couple of the guys from the crew. And then I got really, really late at night. I got back to in the early morning hours to the Hyatt in downtown Chicago, and I just didn't want. I was going to disappear. I was going to get back to the boat. I was just going to disappear from worldview. And then we ordered room service. I wasn't taking any calls, and the very kind of elderly, rickety, but very dignified room service guy reminded me very much of like a railroad porter guy, that kind of black man, deep in his middle age. And he came in, and he saw how bummed out I was, and he kind of gave me a hug, and he said, "Don't worry, they're not going to blame you for the bad news." And then he gave me my messages, and I had a stack of messages. And in the stack of messages, I had 22 job offers.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
But before I get to the awesomeness of those 22 job offers coming off of what had to have been like the pit of despair for you, how long were you in the hotel room? How long were you shutting yourself off from the world?
Well, I got there late at night, sort of hungover. This was mid-morning.
Okay, so it was overnight, and it was
definitely
drinking.
It was overnight in time to get the ratings.
Right.
Ratings came out overnight, so they came out in the morning.
By the way, when you saw that it got a 57 share, that 30 million people had watched, did you start to change your thought process a little bit? Maybe this isn't such a failure?
Well, remember, now I have the stack of messages. I'm going through it. Paramount TV, you must call right now. ABC, you must call right now. NBC, you must. ABC was the only one we didn't have. I mean, one after the other. Entertainment Tonight, and this one and that one. And then the ratings news, and a 65 share here, and a 70 share here, and a 50-something share there. And then I started thinking about what the guy had told me about people not blaming me for the bad news. And I think by and large that happened. People took it with a sense of humor, but I swear that between that and getting my nose broken in the brawl with the skinheads, I feared that that's what they put on my gravestone.
Well, let's do that then. Let's talk about
my gravestone.
No, not your gravestone yet. All right, you've got this stack of job offers, by the way, 22 different job offers. How is it the one you selected was the Geraldo Show, the one you went with?
Well, that's a good question.
What were some of the other ones? Give me some examples of some of the other job offers.
Going back to the news business, fronting news divisions for O&Os, a lot of kind of legit, but a lot of show offers. Do a show with us, we want to do a show. Why don't we do live shows just like that, multi-hour live presentations on our network, here or there, the other place. So they were very substantial job offers, but I decided ultimately, the Chicago Tribune Company was the one that brought me to Chicago. They brought me to the party. They had produced the show in as dignified a manner as they could, given the kind of burlesque nature of it. And they teamed with Paramount, and they said, we can put a daytime talk show together. And you like Phil Donahue, you like Oprah Winfrey, you like Regis hadn't started yet, but those two were certainly seminal examples. You can be a news guy, and you could also be flamboyant and live and do stuff, and and not only that, but we'll give you a job starting right now on Entertainment Tonight as the kind of the investigative correspondent. You can start next week if you want to. So I never completed that trip around the world, not until years later.
So you picked the Geraldo Show. What was your vision for it? Was it to do a Donahue show? What did you want the Geraldo Show to be?
Well, I had done a show called Good Night America, which I called the second generation TV news magazine with the rock and roll correspondent. I was like the rock and roll correspondent, the first of the hippies. So my vision was to do Donahue but hipper, to do Donahue but in the rock and roll era. That was the kind of a, and much more emphasis on minority issues maybe than Phil had done at that time. And that's what we did.
Okay, you said you can't be embarrassed. You've got the Geraldo Show. NBC's Brandon Tartikoff says this. I wrote this quote down. He said, there are two words that serve as a signal that you're operating in an area of questionable taste. Those two words are Geraldo Rivera. 2 U.S. senators called it trash TV.
Well, let me go back to Brandon Tartikoff and NBC. I did a 2-hour special for them on Satanism that I believe is still the highest rated multi-hour documentary they've ever aired on NBC network. In terms of the trash TV, that followed the brawl with the skinheads. And a lot of that, not to suggest that it wasn't trash TV to an extent, although I think it was a lot better a show. If you look back on the old shows, it's a lot better than its rap. But the senators, I think, were really instigated by Roger King, who is the producer and co-owner of Oprah's show, and we had gained on Oprah tremendously in the daytime arena. She was unassailable, and our ratings were creeping up, and we were very, very competitive. And I think that Roger stabbed me in the back and went to the senators and got Joe Lieberman of Connecticut, who I subsequently became friends with, and I forget who the other one was, on board, and they started this clean air campaign. And that's where the whole trash TV.
Yeah, but so Geraldo, look, you said between the broken nose and Al Capone's vault, you know, those are things going to be tattooed on your tombstone. And there are also moments of embarrassment. It's a shame, as you said, you've won a Peabody. You've won a Peabody for journalism. You've had some of the highest rated shows in history. You stood up for integrity against Roone Arledge at ABC and sacrificed your job for that. And yet these two moments, those are the ones, as you said earlier about your name, you can't seem to shake. Why is that?
You know, that's an excellent question. I think I'm going to leave that one to my biographers to figure it out, assuming anyone ever cares to write about it. Now, if I were to speculate about it, I really was the first of the hippies to be in mainstream broadcasting. When you look at the first, they were basically 50s people that dominated television. I was the first of the long-haired, dope-smoking, progressive, liberal, flamboyant types who blended. Not only could I go and report from some war zone and duck bullets, or, you know, people forget about all the urban stuff, all the, you know, you see with Philip Seymour Hoffman dying of an overdose. I mean, I invented dope coverage on TV. First one ever to show, I won the Columbia DuPont for drug crisis in East Harlem. First one to show junkies shooting up. First one to show junkies full face. First one to confront, you know, the pushers and all the rest of it. Now, the trash TV aspect of it was directly related to the violence of the confrontation with the skinheads and the phenomenon that I invented and subsequently was so embarrassed by that I had to leave daytime television, the dissecting and exposing of the weaknesses of the inner city family in terms of who's your baby's daddy and all that stuff, and the DNA test. They didn't invent DNA, and then they did when in the later part, and I just couldn't stand it anymore.
You're embarrassed by that?
You know, I'm embarrassed is I'm not very embarrassed by very much. I think when people look at me now, even my severest critics, they have to say, yeah, you know, he's got guts. Oh my God, here he's 44 years, so.
But there's something here. You're not proud of that turn of the show?
Well, I had to leave daytime because I hated that. I mean, I ultimately, I punched the set. I was making a ton of money. I mean, I was making.
How much were you making?
I was making, I don't want to say. I mean, it wasn't double figures, but it was damn close to double figure millions. I mean, it was a lot of dough. It was more that I could spend than it was, you know.
Is that what you walked away from, though?
That's what I walked away from.
Is that money still on the table when you walked away from it?
It was still on the table. I was making a fortune.
Clearly, Geraldo,
I took a major pay cut to walk away from the daytime show, but I got a major contract with NBC News, remember. I got a $30 million 6-year deal with NBC News that, you know, it's not exactly part-time work.
Right.
I wouldn't have to like apply
Still,
for the
though,
subsidy for Obamacare.
walking away from 10 million plus a year, you had to have not felt very good about what you're doing. I mean, that is putting a quantification on it.
It wasn't that as much, Will, as it was I wanted to get back to a legacy. You're seeing it from the negative side. I wanted the quest for respect. Here I had wealth. Now I wanted to regain the respectability I had in the Peabody Emmy days.
Tell me about ratings. I mean, here we've talked about the Capone vault story. We talked about the Geraldo Show, both of which got huge ratings.
Huge, yeah.
Do ratings justify the choices that you make, that any of us make?
That's an excellent question.
I mean, clearly after a while, the ratings stopped justifying it for you.
You know, the thing about ratings, and people bitch about them all the time, but if you have a great show and nobody's watching, then it's not a great show. You know, it may in some esoteric sense satisfy some need that some very small segment of the population has. Usually it's the ego of the producer or the talent. On the other hand, you can be relatively highly rated and do a show that's kind of, look at Jerry Springer. I mean, every show, what I walked away from, Jerry, and Maury Povich also, you know, and I like Maury a lot. He's married to Connie Chung. They were my neighbors in Monmouth County, New Jersey. I mean, I couldn't do that. And now we're going to open up, and Jose, you're not the baby's father, you know, Frederico is. I couldn't do that. I couldn't do that. And again, I want to go back to something that I really want to make sure that the record is clear on that. My daytime show was in any kind of, you know, respectability meter was far more substantively respectable and respectful than many of its progeny, many of the shows that followed, if not most of them.
You think we've gone in a direction that has pursued that path even further?
I think Katie Couric and Anderson Cooper failed because they failed to understand what you have to do in daytime. Steve Harvey, on the other hand, understands it and is balanced.
And what is that you have to do in the daytime?
You've got to do stories that are relevant to the people who are home watching TV in the daytime. You know, they don't care so much, you know, about you know, the Iranian nuclear crisis, you know, or, you know, the nuances of Obamacare. They care about, you know, who's going to be the father of my baby? Mm-hmm. You know, what's going to happen with this or that entitlement program? What's going to happen with my youngster? You know, is he going to, you know, they care about life in the big city.
In your '92 autobiography, Exposing Myself, you said you slept with 1,000 women.
Oh, those are good years.
You know, walk me through the mechanics of that, by the way.
With like 1,000 women?
Like time management perspective.
I forgot I had said that. I thought that was Will Chamberlain. Or maybe he said 10,000. You know, I got famous at an early age. So now I'm famous at 26. And going from being a skinny, pimply-faced, you know, marginal high school athlete, now I'm suddenly king of the world and I got all this money. And it's really pretty easy pickings when you're in that kind of situation.
But what does that mean?
It's not particularly my magnetism or anything. It's more, you know, what I represent.
Come on, people's most beautiful man alive.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right.
But I'm serious. The mechanic. I mean, were you going out to bars? Were you going out to clubs? Is that where you're meeting women? Was it?
Well, you need advice on this area?
I'm fascinated. Take me back to those wonderful times of Geraldo.
It's almost like being in those days. Now you have to flash back to the 70s and 80s. What you're talking about here. The biography is 92 is the paperback, so I really wrote it in 90. So it was mostly
so the numbers
a trip down memory lane.
So the numbers are higher. You're saying.
Right, that too. But you have groupies basically. You have you know, in those, you know, I want to be careful with my tense, but it was, you know, constantly surrounded by temptation that was instantly fulfillable and no rules. I mean, all of the workplace
but this is the
protections
same time.
You have now, they're all gone. I mean, in those days, they didn't exist. Now, if you look at an intern with cross eyes, you go to jail. I mean, you get fired. Office affairs are monitored. There was none of that. It was really a much more...
also the time, Geraldo, of
it was
STDs
like the
and
SNL
HIV,
after party. It was the SNL after party every day. basically.
70s, 80s. This is also the time of STDs, of HIV, of these kind of things. That ever scare you?
You know why they didn't? Because AIDS didn't exist in the 70s. I mean, it really, even when it existed, no one knew what it was, and unless you were a gay American or a gay person, the odds are you wouldn't get it. So it was almost like sex was free. You have no HR, no human resources, no workplace rules against it, lots of money, relative youthfulness, a young staff surrounded by sycophants and enablers. You know, it's very people smoking joints openly in their office. You open the window maybe if you're being respectful, but it was people who were doing cocaine everywhere. I personally didn't get into cocaine. I was so.
Did you ever get into drugs of any kind?
Weed. I was on the board of the National Association for the Reform of Marijuana Laws in '72, along with senior Senator Jacob Javits here in New York. But we were prophets, it turns out, because everything we said in '72 is coming true in 2014. It
wasn't just groupies, by the way. Bette Midler, Liza Minnelli, Chris Evert.
What?
What? Bette Midler didn't have some nice things to say about you, by the way.
Well, you know.
You were nothing to write home about. You want to tell me how she was?
I swore after the reaction she had to the book that I would never again speak of her in those terms. But I will say that she was a fantastic entertainer, still is, and her longevity is also evidence of the substance that she brings to the table.
I want to talk about your legacy again. Tell me this, what are you most proud of? By the way, if I'm assigning pride to you, you've already told the story. It's getting fired by Roone Arledge for saying you didn't stand up for integrity. It's for a story that never got aired. But I know you've won a Peabody for exposing the Willowbrook State Home here in New York. You were the first to report that Elvis didn't die of a heart attack, that he died of a drug overdose, which led, by the way, to his doctor's medical license being revoked. What are you... Here you are. You're 70 years old. What are you most proud of?
Isn't that amazing? I'm 70 years old.
It is amazing.
It has to be. There are a lot of more philosophical answers, but let me tell you something that's real in my life now. I'll give you two quick anecdotes. One is, in the Willowbrook exposés that exposed the largest institution for what we call the mentally retarded in those days, now called the developmentally disabled, and now people with developmentally disabled children or relatives know what I'm talking about. It could be retardation, it could be autism, it could be a whole spectrum of things. They were warehoused in this awful place, the world's largest institution. Over 6,000 people, right in Staten Island, in New York City. I was a local newsman. I exposed that. And the most important thing we did with that story, though, with the help of John Lennon and others, was not only complain about an issue, isn't it horrible the way we take care of the mentally retarded, but also to suggest a remedy to it. Here's how we could do it and save money. You know, the unions are sucking all the money, the bureaucrats are sucking all the money. We need small community-based residents, 2, 3, 4, 5 people living together. One of the people I liberated from Willowbrook, where they had about a 25-year, 30-year lifespan, was a guy named Bernard Carabello, who sort of looked like me, mustache and everything else. He had been there since 3 years old. He had been misdiagnosed. He has CP. He has cerebral palsy. And he had been misdiagnosed as retarded. In fact, he just had bad packaging. He had a fine mind. So he turned 21 the day we did the expose. We grabbed him, we took him out of there. Bernard now is in his 32nd year as a civil servant working for the state of New York as a patient advocate. And I was just with him for his birthday. He's going to work another 2 years to get a full pension, and he's going to retire. So that's one story, showing the potential of, the wasted human potential. And that's really why I'm so proud of that.
The positive outcome of a story.
The positive, and people coming up to me every day, you saved my old uncle, you saved this one, or my daughter, or this or that, and now they're in a nice community-based residence, now they've got a job at McDonald's, or this or that. So that's history. That's much more than anything else. That I had a positive impact. I used the media and the leverage that the media provides to change something in a profound way, to help, to be the catalyst for change, to be the advocate for the remedy for what ailed us, and I helped bring it about. So being with Bernard, that's one anecdote. The other one, though, is on the dark side of that. We heard that out in the Hamptons in Long Island, in one of these homes I helped create, that the staffers had created like a fight club where they took the adult, developmentally disabled individuals and they had them fighting in the way the Brad Pitt movie with the Fight Club, and then they would root for, bet on this one or that. I was so appalled. I felt almost responsible. How could they, in this wonderful setting, this intimate setting where these autistic and developmentally disabled are really given every opportunity to maximize their potential. Here, these scumbags are doing this horrible, horrible thing. And I started to say, oh my God, maybe I should have paid closer attention. Maybe we've got to monitor this. Maybe my remedy is not as perfect as I thought.
You and I were in your radio studio a week or two ago, and you said to me, I don't want to outlive my fame. I don't want to outlive my fame. Tell me about that.
Well, the reason I said that, I remember why I said that. There's a guy, Mushnick, I think his name is, a very snotty columnist for the sports section on the New York Post. When Edwin Newman died, the NBC correspondent, he very, very well known in his day, which was mostly the 70s and 80s. When he died in 2010, Edwin Newman of NBC News died. No one knew who Edwin Newman was. He died in his 90s, and he had been off the air for 20 years, and I remembered him because I'm an old-timer, but no one else, if you didn't work with him, you didn't know. And so he said he had outlived his fame. And I said, Jesus, am I going to outlive my fame? And it's one of the reasons I'm staying engaged as intensely as I am. I want to die with my boots on. That's half the reason why I go to these places, Libya and Afghanistan, Iraq, get shot at. I've been looking to get killed in action for years. That's one of the reasons I'm so bold, because I don't give a shit.
What does that? Are you addicted to fame?
I don't know. I think that am I addicted to fame? I mean, with 4 ex-wives and 5 children, I think I'm addicted to paying the bills.
Well, that's the other aspect. You said you live in the shoes, or you wear the shoes that you bought. You're telling me you, after, what'd you say, 6 years, $30 million from NBC, over $10 million a year on a syndicated show, you need to work to pay the bills?
Well, the problem is once you start living on savings, then you'd be shocked how much money it takes. Particularly, I mean, when you have a young wife and all these,
you told me about your sailing and your private island.
But not only that, I got basically 5 kids on the payroll. I mean, when you send a kid to private school in New York and then NYU and Northwestern and all that, I mean, you have to be a millionaire to send your kids to private school these days. I think it's shocking. It's awful. That's one of the reasons I'm so active in scholarship and funding for the disadvantaged.
I think the financial aspect is certainly one aspect of it, but you paused just now when I said, are you addicted to fame?
Well, because Dave Marish, another guy I work with, he was at 2020 for a while. He was more famous in New York at WCBS. He said that he was on the subway, and he told a story, and he said, a guy came up to him and said, didn't you used to be Dave Marish? He said, yeah, I'm still Dave Marish. I'm just not on TV right now. So I don't ever want people to come up to me and say, didn't you used to be Geraldo Rivera?
It's kind of, Geraldo, been your one constant. Like you said, you've been married 5 times, you've changed careers, but fame has been the constant.
Well,
it's been the one relationship you've had.
But you notice that aside from Bet, whatever I've been through in terms of the personal side of my life, you never heard one person say any negative thing about me. One woman I've been with, no ex-wife has ever complained. My kids have, it's for a reason. It's because I treat everybody with respect and affection and generosity, and you know, I spread the wealth. What you see is what you get.
You and I don't know each other well, but I can say that everything you just told me is absolutely true. We disagree politically on a fair amount, and you've always treated me with respect, kindness.
Because you're a smart guy, you're a sharp guy. You seem to be true to yourself. I was curious coming over. I said, you know, I never really read Will Cain's Wikipedia. I don't know much about it. I assume that you were well educated in some preppy kind of environment. I don't know for a fact, but I don't know how you became a conservative at a young age.
I'm from a small town in Texas, Sherman, Texas, population 30,000. I'm proud of where I came, and I don't know where I am, but I'm proud of from where I came.
No, you really are. Would you go to UT then?
Law school, Pepperdine undergraduate. They will do a different interview on me.
Okay.
All right, I'm gonna wrap this up with 3 completely bull questions, but maybe they'll tell us something about you.
Well, you started with a couple of bull.
That thing on your face, which you're kind of distorting into a beard these days, that mustache is your trademark.
It is.
Rank that mustache. Is yours the most famous mustache?
So funny.
You got Tom Selleck.
But you know, it's so funny. So I get Bernie Kerekes out of jail, the former New York City police commissioner. I take him to the writing room, which is the new Elaine's. Who do we sit next to? And then, oh no, we went to Elios that time. Sorry, it was Elios. So I take Bernie out for the first time. And sitting next to us is Tom Selleck, who plays the police commissioner. So here I'm with the police commissioner, or the former police commissioner, who's famous for his mustache. Selleck and I have the 2 competing mustaches, and he's playing the New York City police commissioner. So it's like one of those New York nights. My mustache, I grew it in '68 in Brooklyn Law School, and I cannot conceive of life without it at this stage of the game. I think that I would scare my children. I was good friends with Chris Christopherson for many years, and when he shaved his beard off, his own children didn't recognize him, and he subsequently grew it back. I once bet that I would shave it off. I was so convinced that Michael Jackson would be acquitted by that 2005 jury in Santa Barbara on those child molestation charges, which I saw right through from the get-go, that I said I would shave my mustache off if he was convicted. But my plan was I was going to shave it off. I was going to be true to my word, but then I was going to get like a prosthetic mustache to paste on. I was going to save the hairs and paste it on, but I couldn't live without it.
All right, so you've mentioned Chris Christopherson, which I'm, by the way, a big fan of Chris Christopherson. You were friends with John Lennon. Tell me one story from one of these guys. Tell me, how does someone hang out with Chris Christopherson? How does someone hang out with John Lennon?
Well, let me tell you, Lennon is, you know, so much in the news now. I'll tell you one quick story about Lennon. And now with the 50th anniversary of the Beatles coming, and John and I really got very close. And they did the concert for me, the benefit to, you know, to get the money to deinstitutionalize the care of the mentally retarded. John and Yoko and Shannon and Stevie Wonder, Roberta Flack, a lot of people. But John did his last fully rehearsed concert for me in Madison Square Garden to raise money for the. So I was very, very close with John. That was 1972. And then I was one of the 4 witnesses who testified on John's behalf when they were trying to throw him out on an immigration beef. When the Nixon administration, with John Mitchell was the Attorney General, they were trying to throw John out because he was the anti-war activist, but their raison was that he had a dope conviction, a marijuana conviction from the UK, so they were going to say he was an undesirable alien. They were trying to throw. I was one of his 4 witnesses. That is 74, 75, I think 76, they dropped the charges finally. Or 75, just before the Ford, I guess, was president. So they dropped the charges against John. John then got into drugs, went back to the West Coast, came back. He and Yoko reconciled. They put together an album called Double Fantasy that was a great hit. It was the first hit he had had since leaving the Beatles. It was 1980. It was late in the summer. I lived at 64th and Central Park West at that time. They, of course, lived in the Dakota. So they came by. It was John and Yoko, and they had Sean, was a toddler, in a stroller. And they came outside my building, and we stayed there, and we talked, and we reminisced about the concert. We reminisced about his time in New York, down on Bank Street, and smoking dope, and everything that we had done together. And he was so happy, and they had a song that was in the top 10 with a bullet. The whole album, the Double Fantasy album, was really hot. It had taken off, so the first big hit. And then 3 weeks later, I'm in my apartment. I have the doors open onto Central Park, 6th floor. In those days, New York was doing 2,000 homicides a year, so it was very common. I heard shots outside. So what? Another, another murder in the park. That's the way it goes. Then I got a call, Geraldo, you got to come into work. It's Nightline, Ted Koppel's Nightline. You got to come into work. Why? Your friend John Lennon's just been murdered. And so, I mean, first of all, I get choked up even thinking about it. I'm blessed that I had that meeting with him then, that we could all be together. And I've been friends with Yoko since, and Sean too, since, you know, they've been very nice to me, and vice versa. But I'm glad that we could talk about, you know, that we could button up our relationship, but then the horror, when you think about 1980, when you see Paul McCartney now, John Lennon dead in 1980, this is now, what are you're talking about, 34 years. Just think of how much he could have created in that, how much that schmuck.
Did you go do that broadcast?
Yeah, I went to do it. I almost lost it. It was live. So they redid it for the West Coast because I was so emotional, and I was instructed to not be emotional on the second time.
All right. Thanks for coming to hang out.
Hey, thanks, man. Cool. Thanks for the beer.
Hey, by the way, I forgot to ask you, so the fame. I'm interested in the whole concept. You're 70, fame. Did the selfie have something to do with this?
I mean, when you're 70, you want to look like me.
Geraldo,
you know? The whole thing is
100% I want to look like
if
you. That's an amazing body for 70. I'm a straight guy. I don't care.
I don't care straight or not. I seduce.
But no, why'd you do it?
I seduce everybody. Straight.
Why'd you put the selfie out though? Was it part of the fame thing? How you used to be a guy?
It was exactly that. You're very perceptive. It was, hey man, look at how I look, and people don't know it. They just, you know, they're starting to think of me as like the. You know, the old time guy, and then the fact of the matter is, you know, I still have the same waist on head.
You don't have anything to tell me about Chris Christopherson? Getting drunk with Chris Christopherson, talking about Barbra Streisand?
Oh, so funny. I remember once he was going to do Chris was going to do a thing with the United Farm Workers, and so we had to drive from LA to Santa Barbara. By the time not Santa Barbara, Bakersfield. By the time we got to Bakersfield, he was so wasted that he fell off the bus right in front of Cesar Chavez. I'll never forget that. Good, man. Thanks.
Really, thank you, man. I appreciate it. I meant what I said. You have been one of the nicest guys to me in this business. I don't know if you mean it or not.
No, I totally did.
All right, I'll see you. All right.